What's happening, guys? Hope everyone's doing well. Now, a few of you asked me recently sort of how my head works when it comes to taking photos, editing photos, and sort of everything related to it. So I thought, what better? I'll sit down, I'll go through it with you start to finish as to how I like to take my photos and how I like to edit the photos. Now, you're going to see a comparison here. You're going to see the original photo and you're going to see the edited photo. Now, it's important to note that these photos are raw photos. These are not taken and edited. These are how the camera sees it first out. Now, in terms of the cameras I'm using, I use a Sony A7 Model 3. I've done a lot of research into the Model 2, 3 and 4 and found for the type of content I was looking at doing moving forward, this camera was the best for me. For the videos that I've been taking, for the type of content I'm looking to do, and also for the photos that I wanted to take, this was just the all-round best camera for me. In terms of the lens, I'm using a Sigma 24 to 70mm E-mount lens with a CPL filter. The camera is just brilliant. The lens is fantastic. It's just, they couple together really well. And the photos and videos you can get out of them, they are second to none. And for a sub £3,000 bracket for camera and lens, it is relatively affordable when you look at the sort of higher end cost that they can go to. And it's a brilliant camera overall. I'm absolutely in love with it. I think it's fantastic. This camera's just so good. I really get on with it. In terms of the audio, I'm always running the DJI wireless mics. Good thing with these is you can record directly onto the microphone, you can record onto your device, or you can even record onto the DJI receiver, and then you can do a little clap or something like that to sync them up, and then you can edit it in post. Now with that, let's move on to the photo and sort of how I go about editing it. Now, first thing I like to do is look at it and go, okay, so what are we working with here? Let's have a look at the crop. Is there anything we want to get out? Is there anything that doesn't need to be in there? And you think, okay, well, we can just bring it in a little bit and we can get the majority of the photo to be focused on the subject. In this case, the subject is myself and my bike. So already we've got rid of the stuff that you don't really need to be seeing. Now it's quite dark, even though it doesn't seem it was quite dark the night that we took these photos in London. So the first thing I'd say is to bring the shadows up. And the reason being is it will bring back the detail in the photo which you otherwise would have lost. So just from that first bit, you can see there, you bring a bit more detail into the darker notes of the photo. Once you've done that, I tend to then look at the highlights and go, okay, is it peaking anywhere? Yes, you can see quite a lot of reflection and glare in the glass and on the sort of front shinier bits of the nose cone of the bike to say. So we'll bring those highlights down and we'll just get it to a point we're happy with. Now, you don't want to go the whole way because you're going to lose everything, but if we go to sort of the 80 bracket, I think that's good enough. So then we bring some detail back in and get rid of the high spots so you can see the colours a heck of a lot better. Now then bring the exposure up slightly on this one, just because we're losing some of the detail, bring the exposure back up into it and you can gain some of that clarity and contrast in everything that's going on, especially with the bike being quite vibrant in terms of its colour. Now the graph, you've got three different options really when it comes to curves in my opinion. You've got a positive S-curve, a negative S-curve, and then you go on what I call a double negative and a positive. It's probably not called that, it's probably a technical name. So an S-curve is essentially, you'll bring this one down and you'll bring this one up, and that is an S-curve. And that as it sits isn't too bad. Another one you can do is this. You just bring that second negative in, and just from that small change there, the clarity that it brings, especially with the contrast in the real vibrant colours, I think it's phenomenal. So you go from this to this, and it just looks great. It just really does it well. Now you probably tell from a lot of the photos and videos that I do put up, especially outside, I like to bring the colour temperature down. It's just a personal preference on sort of how I take photos. I like them to feel quite cool. As it was shot, as 4,300, that's essentially what the camera has detected as the sort of the warmth, if you like. But I'm still going to bring it down. I'm going to bring it down probably somewhere around 3.4, 3.5, something like that. So we'll go around here. I'm quite happy with that. Now we've still got quite a bit of editing to do, so it's going to make it seem really off, but just bear with me on this. Again, with the bike being quite a vibrant colour, we're going to bring this up, but nothing crazy, because if you go too far, you run the risk of bringing way too much colour mix in there. It just doesn't look very good. Now saturation is really important not to go too high. Saturation is just, it is awful if you oversaturate a photo. So if anything, you do more on the vibrancy and less on the saturation. So I'm relatively happy with how that sits. When you're going into the real finite specifics, you can choose certain colors, change the hue of them, all that sort of stuff. You'll see there it's just changing stuff on the boots. We're not going to worry too much about that in this one because I didn't, in fairness, need to do that with this photo. It was all kind of working together and contrasting against each other really well. The last few bits I like to do is the effects section. Now, before we get into color grading and that sort of stuff, I like to bring the texture up in the photo, and you can really see the difference then, just from that small little change. So we take that back, get back up here, you can really see there, the detail that you gain just by bringing that texture up is phenomenal. A small amount of clarity, I typically go roughly half clarity to texture, that's my average rule of thumb. And that works well for me. Now you're going to find that you will edit photos differently and different mixtures will work better based on how you're editing your own photos and the sort of feel you're going for. Now the vignetting section for these sorts of photos essentially just kind of brings the either overexposed brightness into the corners or an underexposed darker feel to the corners. Now this obviously we're going to go for the opposite way, we're going to go for the darker feel, and it just kind of highlights and makes you focus on the subject that little bit more, which what I think really makes a photo stand out. Now the last section is the color grading. This is the very last thing I do on there. Some people start with it, some people finish with it. That's kind of how I like to roll with things. So if we go to the full extreme, you'll see exactly what you're going to be editing. So if we go here to the red section, you will see everything that's getting affected by that section there. Now, although we're going for a cool photo, for the mid-tones, it's quite nice to have a warmer feel. So somewhere between sort of greens and yellows. I won't go too far between yellows and reds because it just won't quite sit right. So we'll bring it there, and then I tend not to go anywhere past sort of 20, 25 in terms of the intensity of that effect. Now again, the shadows, we're going to go right the way to the end just so you can see exactly where it's affected. Now with it being cool, this photo, I like to bring the shadows more towards the cooler spectrum. Again, we'll bring that round probably sort of 15, play around with it a touch more. Just see, I think there's around the sweet spot. Highlights, again, bring it to the extreme section. It's a cool photo, so we'll bring that round. And then the last bit we will do is see if we want to do some blending or not. Essentially what it does is it either blends it more towards one way or one towards the other. And you can also affect that with a balance. So we're going to leave that as it is. I'm quite happy with that. Now that is pretty much everything. If you were happy with that, you can go, yeah, I could upload that. Not a problem at all, I'm quite happy with that. The one thing that I quite like to do is to add gradients in there. So if we go for a linear gradient, if you follow this section here, you can see the red section is what is going to be edited, and as it fades, it will have less of an effect on that section. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring that in here, bring that around to the front tyre, and let that fade out. We'll add another one just around the opposite side of the bike. But now what we don't want to be doing is editing all of the glass section. So we can click the minus button, we can hit the brush, and then we can quite literally brush away the area that we don't want to have affected. Now, where you've got the density and the feather, if you run that all the way to 100, when it comes to removing it, it will just remove it like a rubber would basically, rather than trying to sit there and go over the same thing for ages. So now we've got that to here, don't want to affect there. That is the section that we're going to be editing. Now I like to bring it down slightly because once again, it makes you focus on the subject a bit more, a bit of contrast in there. The highlights I actually like to bring up in this because any sort of little grainy, gritty bits on the floor, it just gives it that extra sort of depth of feel. Shadows will touch down a little bit, the whites will come up slightly, and then for me it's just a case of upping the texture to 100, the clarity sort of either halfway, or on this particular occasion, because you're trying to really bring it out over the top, I like to go all the way. And that is pretty much the photo done. So we've gone from a really sort of bland, basic, as it sits, all the way through to the finished product, which in my opinion, I think looks absolutely fantastic. Now, it's important to note, I'm not a professional photographer. It's not something I've done as a paid job or had any sort of experience in. I quite literally just picked up a camera, started shooting photos and started to practice more and more. So I'm really happy with that as it sits. As time's gone on, I've started to sort of zone in and go and add details in certain areas. So I'll show you one particular thing I mean. I did this recently with the Alpine Stars helmet while it was sat on this table actually. So what I did was went in, hit the brush, and then click the add and make it so we're literally just touching all of the white on the Alpine Stars logo on the helmet. I'll speed that a little bit up. Now what we can do is bring the exposure up slightly, and if we bring the whites out, and I mean really bring the whites out along with the highlights, what you will find is when we zoom out and we go to look at the photo, if you look at the helmet directly, you'll see it just really brings out the Alpine Stars logo. It's just a nice little touch. Now to go one step further, we'll go back onto that logo. And on the back of the helmet, we'll fill this section in. And then you'll see there, just like that, brought some additional detail back into the helmet. Now for me, that is everything I would do on this photo. Now I've taken my time a little bit with this. You can get down to editing photos like this in sort of 3-4 minutes a photo. And what you can do is once you're done, you can copy those settings. You can go to another photo that was taken in the same area with the same camera settings, and you can just paste them straight over. Sometimes they work and they look really good. Other times they don't, it just depends. You just have to give it a go. But it's always a good starting point with working on the same settings and just tweaking it. But yeah, that is pretty much how I take my photos, how I edit my photos. That's pretty much it. There's not a great deal else to it. If you've got any questions on Lightroom, photography, anything like that, I'm more than happy to give my sort of opinion on how I could improve it or how you may be able to improve yours, any general questions you've got. Yeah, just let me know. Let me know if you guys enjoyed this video, something ever so slightly different, but I thought it'd be good to show you how I do things basically. But apart from that, yeah, thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.